Good morning, everyone. It's Joker, and today we are back with another slime video. Realizing that with the the early Jubilee that came, and my announcement that I was gonna take a break on forcing content out for February, I totally forgot to make the how to build video on the new Tournament Stalwart team. So I figured I would record this on the off chance that you did summon for this meta and you had questions on what you should be looking for in this team as it pertains to the beatdown battle that is going on right now. So we're going to take into account everything and all the different foibles that the current beatdown battle has with the stat debuff reversing effect. But this will have the same format. We're going to break it down section by section. Timestamps will be in the bottom, so if you're looking for something specific, you can just kind of skip around. But we're just going to talk about everything you need to know about the Tournament Stalwart team and what you're going to be looking for in terms of a good build quality. So let's jump in and get started. Alright, so Charms, right now, as of just having the first banner out, this team severely lacks skill points on blue orbs. Normally, blue protectors give you some sort of enhancement to your skill point gain on blues because blues inherently don't give you a lot. And while Veldora does give you 30 points for the first 5 turns, that's not really enough sometimes. So first off, let's see, let's try and find it. The increases Soul of Divine Protection's skill point increase by 40%. This could be a big time one in case you need to use a number of different buffs to help your Lumi do a lot of damage. Small, cheap buffs, but they all cost points, and you're going to need some points. So this would be my number 1 pick for Charm, the Blue Soul skill Charm. The second pick would be the AoE attack Charm. Since Lumi is an AoE character, and she has a very strong personal buff, that physical attack and physical damage, the AoE buff increases all allies, all our target attack by 8%, really going to help out Lumi's ult. 8% doesn't seem like a lot, but the AoE buff is a multiplicative thing, which on top of the already multiplicative physical damage buff, it means that this 8% is doing quite a bit more than what you would expect it to. So that would be like my second charm. Another, maybe third charm would either be extra crit damage, since this is a crit focused team. The new Shinsha gives you like 15% crit damage and guaranteed crits, so she's doing double duty. But you can always get a little bit more in case you don't have the carrying or something. Or you could do a wind attack charm. Either one. Because you're already getting crit damage, maybe you don't have to double up on it, and you do the wind attack, maybe not a one that's not done, but still, this one. But primarily, I would run these skill points on blue. That way you have the points to use whatever kinds of buffs that you want to do. And that's what I think people should be focusing on. Okay, so orb changing, not really a super big issue for this team. What does turn 1 have? I haven't actually played the beatdown battle in a while, so I don't know what this. I don't remember what the starting hand is. It is oranges to blues. Okay, so for turn 1, because you're gonna have that orange to blue, Lumi steals 3 orbs, so she can handle turn 2. And then on turn 3 and beyond, Veldora's going to be giving you guaranteed hands of blues. So you only really need to worry about turn 1, and it's blue to or orange to blue orb changing. And you could do that with a couple of different units. You could do it with the free-to-play Geld right here, the Wind Geld you can get out of the flashback shop. If you have him, you could use the free-to-play Rieger as well. Orange to blue. I mean, there should be a few more of these hiding around here somewhere. Technically Misery, but that's only Primal Demon Orb, so I wouldn't really count that. Water Shuna. She's a magic character, but she's going to give an ult buff, so she could double duty as a turn 1 converter and an ult buffing character for Lumi. So she could be actually quite useful here. I think Dark Milim is a double to blue orb changer, I think, being the keyword. I don't really use her except in the support slot. There's a few different characters. Fount of Wisdom Rimuru, technically yes, but his buff kind of clashes with Lumi's buff, so maybe not the best pick in the world. Megumin, if you have her, again, will kind of do what Shuna was doing, alt buffing and orb changing. Violet technically can do it, but she's giving a magic buff, and Lumi is physical, so she wouldn't make too much sense. So if you don't have any of those characters and you can't get Rieger because their beatdown battle's inactive, Geld is fine. He's free to play, he's easy to get out of the flashback shop, he's your best option. So turn 1, you would use Geld to convert this, and then turn 2, you would bring Lumi in and triple orb steal into 6 Lumis, and then you would have access to Veldora, and then after that, you don't need to worry about orbs anymore. So, pretty easy. Alt swapping, Shinsha's got that, at least for wind characters. So, I expect we get maybe a single target wind character as well, for single target DPS, and Shinsha will alt swap both of those. If that's not really your cup of tea, you could do a couple other orb changing characters. Maybe not some recent ones. Well, Rieger, if you have Rieger, he could orb change turn 1 and alt swap in case you get alts for somebody else who's not wind only, because then Shinsha can't swap those. So he's going to work pretty well. The Summer Shizu, an older character, but she can do a single alt swap, and she can give weakness strike, which will help Lumi hit harder, because we're type advantage in the beatdown battle, and she's physical as well, so that works out fairly well. And then for another alt swap to blue, Blanc, technically you could use Blanc. The synergy resistance down doesn't really hurt you, because as of right now, this is a crit-focused team, and you're not going to use a synergy buff, so there's nothing really bad about it. And she can alt-swap into 3 blues, and it doesn't matter what element you are. And the only downside is her being a magic unit, which will not help the EX board for our physical Lumi. But definitely she's a solid option, because at least she can give you the weakness strike buff and triple alt-swap, and some protection gauge as well, if you have her duped out. And then, our options get a bit more limited. The Shuna could also act in place of Blanc. They're going to do the same exact thing on this team. Their second part of their buff skill doesn't matter to Lumi, because it's a magic buff for her or it's a synergy down. Either way, Lumi's not getting it. So, it is what it is. As far as free-to-play options, Glenda, I think, only does... No, okay, she can do it. So if you have Glenda, you can get it. She would give synergy to Commander, which this Lumi is on Commander, but you don't want to synergy this fight. They have synergy resistance, or you get synergy nerfed, one of the two. I can't remember. And then, as far as other alt swapping, Gobta technically, but he's changing orbs to green orbs to blue. I don't really know if you need that, apart from turn 1 for the oranges. But there are a few options you can use to alt swap away. Blanc and Summer Shizu probably going to be your best options, obviously, since Blanc is so good, just in general. Shizu is even older than Blanc, so maybe you pulled her off of something. And if you don't really care about them and you just want to run Shinsha to alt swap your wind characters, then you just need Shinsha. Alright, moving on to damage support characters. Lumi has the very strong physical attack and physical damage buff, so we're covered on that. We don't need the physical buff from like Tempest Elite Benimaru or Fountain Wisdom Rimuru, because it would just clash with Lumi's buff, so it's a waste of points. We're going to get guaranteed crit and guaranteed crit damage, 15% from Shinsha, and then we're going to get the attack buff from Veldora. So we've got crit, physical, and attacks covered. So we need some element buff, we need some alt damage, we need some higher crit damage. You cannot debuff this fight because of their stat reversal effect. You cannot put any debuffs on them, or at least ones that you want to matter. So it does eliminate quite a few support units from contention, unless they have like a 2-part buff and debuff where you can hold one of them and they'd be useful, and you can just let the debuff fall off. First example with that would be Warrior's Mind Violet. Where are you? Especially if she's skill fused, you can give yourself more crit damage than what Shinsha is giving. The first part of her skill is the alt resistance down, which you don't want to give the enemies, But you can just buff Lumi with the crit damage, send her away, and then you could wait for this to fall off of the enemies, and then you could nuke, and you would just have the crit damage left over. That would be something you could do. If you're looking for crit damage, Carrion is on the banner with them, and he is a crit damage character, giving character. If he's skill fused, he can actually give you 40% crit damage within the first 4 turns, and it lasts for multiple turns, so you can have it go into turn 5. So he is definitely an option for you for crit. The Masked Hero, technically you can use, but you're already getting crit rate from Shinsha, and her crit resistance down debuff would turn into a buff on the enemies, so it's also not what you want. Her rewind, yeah, can be cool, but I actually wouldn't really bring her right now. Another character who I have a showcase for is actually Space Millum. If she's skill fused for her Drago skill, you can give Drago to Lumi, because she gives it to Octagram Demon Lord characters now, and Lumi is an ODL character, which would mean that you would enhance all of her buffs by 20%, and that could be pretty impactful depending on what else you bring. But that requires her to be skill fused, so I don't know if that's a solid option for a lot of people. It's very kind of niche. Octagram Lumi, gonna be a pretty favorite character to bring. Yes, she's magic, but she's got that stacking ult damage, she's got that stacking AoE damage, and we talked about how good the AoE charm is. You can get that from this Lumi, and she's also technically, quote-unquote, free with Octagram emblems, right? She's gonna be a solid pick. And then, like I said earlier, if you want to bring like another ult buffing character, whether it be Dark Millum, whether it be Freerin or something, you would have to, well, I don't know if you would bring Freerin because of the synergy rate. Blanc, 150% ult damage. It's quite expensive, yeah. You could bring Kyokyo. No, you can't bring Kyokyo. He's magic. He's giving magic buff. See, having debuffs only does eliminate a few things. Commander Shizu would give 20% more physical attack than what Lumi would give herself, but she'd also give EX ult damage, and she's physical. So, and she could convert turn 1, actually. I totally forgot about her. She could convert turn 1 and buff up Lumi to a point that's higher than what Lumi would do herself. Also kind of expensive, but definitely an option for you. And then, technically, you could do Commander Hinata then as well, and give Lumi a 120% ult damage. And the temporary ult buff from this Hinata and the permanent ult buff from this Lumi would work together in harmony. So that's good. And then, who did we talk about earlier? Summer Shizu, Weakness Strike, Ult Swap, certainly works for you. Blanc, Weakness Strike, Ult Swap works. The same thing with Ogre's Pride Shuna if you have her. There's a number of options you can bring. Just the important part is that you're not bringing a character with a primary, like, major debuff skill, because it's going to turn into a buff on the enemies, and it's going to make them harder to nuke. So it does eliminate a few things from your repertoire, and you can't pierce and you can't synergy, because it's a crit-focused team. So that already, crit teams don't come around very often, surprisingly. So it does limit you. You could bring this Hinata for the all-element buff, which would hit wind characters, it certainly would. You could do that. I guess you could bring Trainee? Where is she? She gives a little bit of a wind buff, and she can also ult rush, but you're already ult rushing from Veldora, so it's very unnecessary to do that. Gotta find what you can work with, but no pierce, no synergy, no debuffs at all. So that's going to be a bit difficult to navigate around. DPS characters, this is an AoE stage. I'm making you a team based on Tournament Stalwart Lumi. She is your DPS character. Like, she is very, very good at doing damage. She steals orbs to herself so she can get her ult very quickly. She has a very powerful, very cheap buff that's going to get enhanced by whatever units you put here, and then Veldora and Shinsha. She is your DPS character, and she can output a lot of damage real quickly with that buff. So the idea of needing like a secondary DPS character, not really what you need to be looking for. You need to be looking to buff Lumi up as much as possible, more than anything else, than trying to figure out some other wind physical character. Because honestly, there's not a lot of picks, unfortunately. Wind has not been touched in quite a while since Exalted Champions, and that was a Magic team. So, I mean, technically, if you want another AoE Wind character, you could use the Exalted Champion Masked Hero, but that's kind of a stretch. I would just focus more on buffing Lumi up than anything else, and trying to bring some secondary side damage character. Make Lumi as strong as possible. She will kill everyone, and that's just the simple way to do it. There's no need for another DPS character here. In terms of alternatives for the Protector Veldora, I mean, obviously he's giving you the big-time damage buff against water enemies. He's giving you the alt rush, he's giving you the attack, he's giving you the future orbs. It's very hard to replicate that. The only character that would remotely come close would be Summer Memories Trainee, who is giving you 40 skill points when you use her, is giving you future Hands of Blues, but then her other part is putting a defense down debuff on the enemy, which is a debuff, which means it's going to give the enemies defense, which is not what you want to do when you're ready to nuke. So she can definitely get you future Hand of Orbs, and 40 points, but that's about it. No one else really does what this Veldora is doing, so if you need to use a substitute, like a stacking protector that doesn't do a buff some way, shape, or form, that doesn't also synergy, it's going to be kind of difficult. You could try and do Warrior's Mind Velzard, because she's just stacking attack, and this Lumi is on Warrior's Mind. It can work. Technically, you're going to have to find some really good damage supports, because you're going to miss out on all of the extra damage that Veldora is giving you just passively. But she can work. Exalted Champion Velzard, both Velzards, funny. She's changing all the orbs to green, which if that's the case, you're probably going to want to bring Exalted Champion Veldora to give the green buff to offset the debuff that the stage just inherently has, because one of them nerfs green orbs here. It might be... Yeah, Frey. Nerfs green gauge for 70% for 7 turns. So you're going to want to offset that, and Veldora does give a 70% buff. And then you would get the Drago effect, you would get the element buff, so Lumi would have the Drago, which will enhance her physical buffs, and then the element buff as well. So that can work for the lower stages. Certainly not dire, but it can work for the lower ones. And then the free-to-play Jiwoo. I haven't even used her yet. I don't know if she would actually work. I think she's kind of not good. But can you use Himmel? Yeah, you can. It'd be the same thing as doing like this Velzard, except oranges technically again are nerfed by protection gauge, but at least you'd get a butt ton of skill points out of it, and you could at least attempt to do a very quick nuke with very cheap buffs. But other than that, your options are pretty limited, because wind teams are not focused on, and yeah, good luck. Alright, and to end off the video, we have some examples of teams that you could potentially make. Definitely not every single team, but at least it gives you an idea of what I'm looking at. This is the team that I've been running. Veldora, we've got the 2nd anniversary Hinata for the element buff, the Shinsha for the crit, Lumi for the AoE and the ult, this Lumi for obviously the damage, and then New Year's Blessing Shinsha for the ult damage and the crit damage, which is higher than what this Shinsha is giving. So we've got the attack, we've got a whole bunch of different buffs covered, none of them are debuffs. Works out pretty well, we do really good damage. Another team would be Commander Hinata, Blanc for the weakness strike and the alt swap, and then Commander Shizu. You know, we have fairly expensive units here, so you're going to have to maybe use the skill point charm and get pretty lucky. But you can at least hold the weakness strike and hold the physical buff and hold the crit buff at the same time. So you could get Lumi's ult very quickly, use the cheap buff, kind of expensive buff, and then wait a few turns, get some points, and then use these 2 expensive buffs. Potentially, you could do that. It would work. This team focuses on the Violet. You'd have to wait a turn for the ult resistance to fall off of the enemies, but you'd still get higher crit damage than what Shinsha is giving. Weakness Strike and the Alt Swap. Shuna, because we talked about it earlier, for the turn 1 Orb Change and the ult damage. That can certainly work in your favor as well. And then this team is a really weird hodgepodge. We've got Festive Memories characters, which I know people probably didn't summon for, but potentially it could work if you were weird enough to summon for Festive Memories Maribel. She does have the EX ult damage, and then if you remove a barrier stack from everyone, you can get Weakness Strike, which certainly works. And if you build a team with 3 Festive Memories characters, you could put the barriers on them, and then you could sacrifice them on the nuke turn. You just have to make sure that you're putting the barriers on this Lumi, this Ritas, and this Maribel. It's very wonky, but options are kind of limited before I start redoing teams over and over again. But these are just small examples of things that you should be looking for. Minimal debuff characters. Crit, you want crit damage, you want ult, you want element, you're already getting attack from Veldora, you're already getting physical buffs from the new Lumi, so those are covered. You're already technically getting crit from Shinsha, but you can give a higher buff. If you wanted, you could just do, you could take all these characters away. Where's Carrion? Carrion with the skill fusion, he could work as well, because he would give higher crit damage. Guy would give you the guaranteed crit rate and the ult damage. And then these 2 slots you could swap out freely. You could do Lumi, and then you could do Summer Shizu or something like that. And you kind of make this team, but maybe a bit more cohesive-ish. But those are some examples of teams that you can build if you have the units, obviously. But this isn't going to work for everyone. You got to do what you can with your own box. And yeah, so hopefully this video helps you out with the idea of what you should be doing with this team. If it does help you out, please let me know in the comments. But that's it for me. Take it easy, and I'll see you all later.